Welcome to episode number 65 of the Between Two Brands podcast. I am still your host. Maybe at some point I stopped saying that. I don't know. It's kind of a habit now. Doesn't matter. I'm still your host. And I want to thank you again for joining me today. I think we've got a fun episode, but I always think that. So there's that. Hey, before we get to said fun episode, let's go ahead and pay the rent, shall we? Hey, distributors, do you know what it's time to do? That's right. It's time to wake up. Your clients are no longer satisfied with you merely acting as a middleman, slapping their logo on generic, predictable, and frankly, uninspiring products. What they're demanding is something more, merchandise that feels as if it were thoughtfully curated just for their unique brand. Now, to stand out, your clients need something exceptional, products that truly reflect their identity and set them apart from the crowd. And this is where our friend Russ Mogel and his team at Seven Sourcing come in. With over 30 years, that's 3 decades if you're scoring at home, 30 years of direct custom merchandise sourcing. They are the clear leaders in the space. Now, here's just a few reasons why you need to partner with Seven Sourcing on custom merch sourcing. Number one, they have established relationships with vetted and trusted factories. That's huge. Number two, they ensure that all merchandise passes rigorous quality control checks by an accredited third-party partner. Number three, they comply with, but more importantly, they frequently exceed industry standards, manufacturing requirements, and product safety regulations. Four, and maybe the most important one, they manage every single part of the logistics and communicate to you through every single stage of the process. Now, in other words, with their expertise, they know how to deliver bespoke merchandise that will position you as a distributor as the hero in the eyes of your client. Also, while helping you steer clear of those common pitfalls that come with it, managing it on your own. Now, to be clear, yeah, it takes a little bit more time, typically between 75 and 90 days, to design, develop, and deliver truly unique and original merchandise. But don't you think that extra planning is worth it to accept, to craft those exceptional products that foster lasting loyalty? I sure as heck think so. In fact, I'm certain of it. So when you're ready to elevate yourself from just another promotional products distributor to a true partner who delivers exactly what your clients are craving, unique, custom branded design merchandise specifically for them, reach out to Russ and his team at sales@sevensourcing.com. All right. So thinking about what I wanted to talk about today in the opening shot, one of the things that I've been watching recently is the regional community. It's something I've been a part of for the last 15 or so years, starting off as a board member at PPA Chicago, and then moving to Tennessee. I moved from Chicago, was on the PPMS board several times, was president, and they were even nice enough, maybe dumb enough, but nice enough to induct me into the PPMS Hall of Fame a couple of years ago. From there, I also served on what he's formerly known as the RAC board as president, but I was also, now I think it's called the Regional Relations Committee. So I've been very rooted in the regional community. I've spoken at many regional events across the country and always been honored to do so. But over the last couple of years, I've been watching the regionals, I don't know, for lack of a better term, struggle with membership, struggle with creativity in events, struggle with really delivering that value to their membership. It's been a very big challenge for them. And I've been when I've talked to people in the regional community, I've said, it's time to rethink instead of how do we do this a little bit better, like the same thing we've always done. What if you did something completely different? And I think I've seen a regional finally do that. Not take my advice. They didn't take any advice from me, but do something that is different. And I love it. And I wanted to talk about that. I want to talk about what I think that means for the regional community. So I really have for a while thought that it's time to rethink what the value to membership is, and especially how that annual bake sale, that's what we always call it, the bake sale of a trade show works, because that is the biggest financial driver. And the good people at SAGNY, the Specialty Advertising Association of Greater New York, and John Cudahy, who's a friend, is the executive director there. They've struggled with their regional bake sale for years. It's Promotions East. It's the largest trade show in the Northeast these days, and has been for the last, I think, 10 years. I could be a little wrong on that. And it's always been a great show. I've been on the planning committee for that for a few years. I've spoken at that event for a few years, and it's always a good event. The challenge is it was in Atlantic City, and people just don't like Atlantic City for a variety of reasons, some of which, got to be honest, valid. So what did they do? They didn't try to change. They wanted to change the location, and instead of going somewhere where it's not exciting, somewhere where it's like, okay, it's a little more convenient to Philadelphia than uh, Atlantic City is. They were really bold, and they went to Manhattan. That's right. They're going to hold a trade show. They're going to hold an event, a large event, the largest event on the East Coast in our industry in Manhattan. It's more expensive. Let's be clear. It's going to be more expensive. It's an investment for SAGNY. Um, but it's so much easier for people to get to. One of the challenges for Atlantic City is you would fly into Philadelphia unless you had a very lucked out and had a direct flight into Atlantic City, which they didn't have many. But you'd fly into Philadelphia, you'd have to catch the train, rent a car, and drive the hour and 10 minutes to Atlantic City. That's no different really than landing at DFW and having and Dallas Fort Worth and having to drive to North Dallas, Frisco, Plano, places like that. It's about the same amount of time, but psychologically it felt so much different, and I think it prevented a lot of people from going. The second thing they did, they moved it away from September, which is usually a very difficult time for a lot of suppliers, and they moved it back to summer. It's going to be June 15th and 16th. And they've completely restructured the event. Check this out. On the 15th, they're going to have a party at a members only speakeasy in Manhattan. It's at the Gainsborough Hotel in the Meatpacking District, which I love saying things like the Meatpacking District. It sounds so New York. Love that. And then on the 16th, it's not really a trade show. They're changing up what it is, and they're calling it a branded merch experience. They're going to have on-site activations, an end user event, and a private supplier presentation. So starting at 11 o'clock in the morning, there's going to be private supplier presentations for an hour from 11 to 12. At 12, the show floor opens, and it's from 12 to 7, which is really unique. Usually, any sort of trade show in our industry starts sometime mid-morning and ends, especially the regional ones, ends around 2 o'clock or so. Not so much here. And it is a 100% end user show. And I love that. I think what it does, and I know some people don't like end user shows. I do. I think it opens up the transparency in our industry, and I think that's okay. In fact, I think in a world where things don't feel transparent, the more transparent we can be, the absolute better it is. And are they going to have education there? I'm so glad you asked. They are. They're having 3 sessions from one speaker. JQ, Jenna Quaranta from HPG, is going to have 3 sessions, and every person that attends is going to leave that event certified in her field sales management training program. I think that's huge. And then, if that weren't enough, I think it is, but if that weren't enough, from 5:30 to 7, they're going to have a host a happy hour on the show floor. On the show floor. They've taken what has been a very traditional model for trade shows at the regional level. And I wouldn't so much say it's 180 degrees, but they have really intentionally rethought what that looks like. And I can tell you, like I said, I've been on the planning committee for Promotions East several years. I was did that for several years, and there was always a thought of what can we radically do differently. It wasn't just like how do we tweak it. It was what do we radically do differently, and there were efforts to do that in Atlantic City. Some worked, some didn't, but that's the nature of that beast. And so I'm super excited for it. I wish I could be there. I can't. It's just not going to work in my schedule. But I'd really like to see other regionals kind of rip up the playbook. And instead of trying to make an existing event a little bit better, I'd love them to rethink what the traditional looks like and actually really put some thought and effort. How do we make this completely different? How do we make it more valuable to members? Because that's the name of the game. So let me ask you this, listener or viewer, depending on what you're doing, YouTube, whatever. What would you like to see? As a member of your local regional, what would you like to see? again, I'm excited about this. I think it's great. I would love to be there. It's just not going to work out for me this year. But man, I love it, and I really hope it is a wild success. I'm sure you can find all the information if you want at sagny.org. But man, great stuff there. All right, before we get to our guest, let's go ahead and pay one last part of the rent, shall we? Hey, do you know what season it is? That's right. It's business valuation season. Now, maybe you don't know what your company's worth. Perhaps it's been more than a few years since your last valuation and you need a new benchmark to see if your company is increasing in value. Heck, you might want to see if it's even time to sell your business. Now, regardless of the reason, Jamie Watson and her team at Certified Marketing Consultants, they have extensive experience in the world of branded merchandise and the theoretical knowledge necessary to provide a fact-based valuation of your business. All you need to do is email them at info@certifiedmarketing.com for a confidential discussion today. All right, let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Hey, my guest today does not need an introduction, but as is custom here, I'm going to waste her time, my time, and frankly, your time because you can't skip ahead. You don't know how long this introduction is going to be. So, joke's on you, isn't it? She is a vice president of sales at Charles River Apparel, where she leads the company's sales organization and focuses on deepening customer partnerships and driving sustainable growth. Now, going on 17 years in the promotional products industry, and more if you want to count free child labor, and frankly, I do. She brings an entrepreneurial experience, a customer first mindset, and a track record of turning insights into action to drive growth. Now, before joining Charles River Apparel, she served as the vice president of sales at PPAI. And for those of you who don't know, that stands for Promotional Products Association International, but I bet most of you knew that. Like I said, I like to waste time. And over there, she oversaw key revenue partnership and member engagement functions. Now, she quite literally grew up in the industry, and we're probably going to get to that, leading her family's business, solar advertising, and ultimately guiding it through its successful sale to Rainy Rose, where she led the promotional sales division. She fervently believes in success in sales, and sales leadership is rooted in clarity, accountability, and partnership. And we're going to get to that, I promise. Not just driving activity. Now, she's a longtime advocate of the promotional products industry. She's passionate about helping teams and customers grow in ways that have lasting impact. And maybe most importantly, she's based in Chicago with her husband, Jeff, and their two dogs, Momo and Luca. We're not going to ask any questions about those names. Now, please join me in welcoming the lovely and equally talented Lindsey Davis. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Let's jump right into it, okay? And I don't want to waste any time. I want to really honor your time, the listeners' time. I'm not going to go on and on and on and just kind of drag this out. I think the most important thing right now, especially when people's time is so valuable, is just to really get into the topic of choice. And the choice is mine because I'm leading the conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and lead this conversation now at a time of my choosing, and I go ahead and choose now. But I'm going to go ahead and start this conversation so as not to waste any time. Okay. All right.
Perfect time.
I am fascinated by people who, quote, quote, grew up in the business, and you did that. I want you to tell me and both of our listeners about solar advertising and what you learned from your parents working with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. My dad found this industry as a second career, I think, as a lot of people do. He had sold a computer programming company, wasn't ready to retire. He was in his 50s, wanted to do something. And he found it through Pressaprint, which I'm sure a few of your listeners will remember, at a home and garden show. They were stamping logos on acorns and golf balls, which was their trade at the time. And he bought
Thanks.
himself a Pressa printer and a
Mm-hmm.
single-head pottery machine, and started doing product for the local community in the city that we lived in. As he moved on, he found other blank products to add logos to. One of them was lip balm. And then they realized that adding logos to blank products that are not apparel, in fact, made them more of a supplier. And so they got rid of all that stuff and focused just on the lip balm because it was also making the most money. And then thought about, how can we make real change there, which wasn't, they wanted to do something natural. And so I think what I learned most from him is that, like, you never stop innovating. So,
Love that.
Yeah, actually, his original company was even called Innovative Systems, which I think is, the most generic 90s name in the history of the world, but also spoke to what he did.
You know
Um,
what? My dad had a side hustle and it was called Petrie Enterprises, P.Tree. So trust me, we can
oh,
go down the rabbit hole of bad names.
I love it. There was a segment of high school where I spelled my name Lin-Z for Lindsay because I thought that was
Oh.
very cool. So yeah, I can have respect for that. Um, but yeah, I think he was constantly reinventing, and I think that's so important because if you don't, you get behind, right? You'd miss the next big thing, and I think that's one of the
Right.
things that, for good or bad, because I think sometimes it can drive people a little crazy. I'm always on to the next thing. Sometimes not even pausing to celebrate the thing that went well.
I
So
love that. And so you learn constantly innovating, reinventing yourself. How has that helped you in your career?
absolutely. So I think it's helped me figure out both my career trajectory, but also helped me in the roles I'm in. Someone joked with me recently that every time they ran into me, I was doing a slightly different job, even at the same company I was at.
Right.
And I think it's just because I always like learning new things. And so I can't help it. I stick my fingers and my nose into stuff and I ask questions and areas like that. I think that's helped me a ton with growing my career, but also growing my skill set. I sometimes
Sure.
it's not areas I get, I work in. It's just areas I help in and I learn about and I ask questions.
Right.
I also think it's created growth at the suppliers I've worked with and at PPI as well to say, can we do this differently? Well, can we do that differently? What if we did this instead? To find some new things that work and find some things that didn't work as well.
No,
So
I love that. And I've known you a long time and you've always had that inquisitive nature. And I love that. We'll probably get more into that. Let's go back a little bit. When you and your family decided to sell to Reigning Rose, I think one of the things we don't talk enough about this industry is those sales happen. They happen fairly frequently. What is that transition like from someone who worked essentially for themselves and now all of
yeah.
a sudden you find yourself, and I'm not going to say Raining Rose is like a super corporate structure, but certainly more structured than probably Solar was. What was that transition like?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's 3 people to 300 people. They're a much bigger company, I think, than people sometimes realize in promo. And so it was a big
Mhm.
change. I would say, like, as a leader, it was amazing in some ways and hard in others. It was the first time I got to take a real vacation in my entire working in this industry career. I didn't bring a computer with me. I wasn't doing proofs on the side. Like, that was
It's
amazing.
it's nice to have a team you can offload things on and do
Yeah,
that.
right. It also was the first time I started building that sort of questioning mindset you and I talk about me having. Nate Robson was an incredible leader who like really fostered that in me and the need to ask questions to learn, whether it's of our customers or other people. And I learned a ton from him.
Mhm.
And like having that opportunity to be under someone who thinks that way really helped move my career along.
Right.
On the flip side, nothing ever goes as fast as when you own it. Like,
Yeah.
period. End of story. You can know something is right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if you bring all the data. There are other stakeholders, there are other people it impacts,
Mhm.
and they have to decide if it meets the same high priority that it meets for you. And if it does or doesn't, is the growth there, is the revenue there, is whatever opportunity you've presented enough to warrant it. And that was a hard transition to not just get to go fast.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
It's interesting. I always tell people one of the reasons I really like working for myself is there's not that red tape. There's not a lot of approval processes. I generally talk to the guy in the mirror, and 9 times out of 10, I agree with that guy if there's something I want to do. And so I completely understand that. So you're Rainy Rose. Let's talk about moving to PPAI because you've always been a strong proponent of the regional associations. That's where you and I met many years ago. I was speaking at a bowling alley. I'm not going to even get into that, but I was speaking at a bowling alley, so you've always been had that passion in that advocacy for the not-for-profit community on the regional level. What was the move? First of all, what went into you deciding to go to PPAI, and what did that mean to you to work there?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. First, it meant everything. I mean, and it still does. It's such an incredible organization. So I think the decision, I was on PPI's board at the time. So I definitely had a front row seat to a lot of the strategy happening and sitting in those rooms. I was really excited about where the organization is headed today. and what they were doing. There was a lot of focus on, promotional products work in the end buyer area. There was a lot of focus on defining the international community and things like that. There was a lot of focus on growth and, helping members learn more. And I was so, so excited about that. At the same time, we were at a place of stability at Raining Rose. It felt good. Like I had done some good work. They were in a stable place. There certainly was more to do, but also we'd reached a pretty exciting milestone. And so it felt like the right time. So I think in the same night, I whisper asked both Dale Denham and Ellen Tucker, hey, would you ever hire me for one of those roles you're talking about? Probably a little more professionally than that, but also perhaps not. And I think they had a conversation when they got back to the office and thought, okay, maybe there's something here for her. And it took a few months to find the right thing. But
so you drove that a little bit. You went to PPAI and said, hey, I want to be there. What roles do you have for me? That's very interesting. I did not know that, actually.
Yeah, no, I did. I very much did. And it comes, I think, from a place of just like such long-term admiration for what the organization does.
Right.
And I mean, my mom voted for the board on paper when I was a kid. Like, how can you not want to be involved in that organization? And it is one of my favorite things I've ever done. I still talk to that community a lot. We just recently did some apparel for them, and I'm still getting texts about it. And that's great because I know them really well and what matters to them. And I'm excited to continue to watch the trajectory they're headed on that listeners got to hear earlier this year from board leadership Andrew. So
yeah, no, I love that. And I know you love being there. Then you had an opportunity at Charles River Apparel. Was it hard before we get to Charles River, because I do want to talk about that. That's what we want to talk most about. Was it difficult to leave PPAI, especially now knowing that I don't want to say you pursued them, that's too strong, but you certainly took the first overture, it sounds like.
Yeah. I know it was incredibly hard. And there are days it still is hard. I mean, I love what they're doing and it's so exciting to watch. And it's cool to see things come to fruition that I had, fingerprints on in early days and things that I had none on. And like, it's just amazing to see this stuff. It's like, even it speaks to the innovation of the organization that they're doing things that I didn't even know they were working on because it started in the last 6 months. How cool is that? So no, it was hard. Expo was hard, like, right, being there. It's always hard being there without my parents, who are both alive. They're just retired.
Right.
But it was hard being there not on staff. And at the same time.
Oh, hold on a second. I'm going to call bullshit right there. I know, first of all, I'm sure on some level it is because you have a lot of friends and stuff there, but there's no way you miss 6:30 a.m. meetings every single day.
I will say that.
And there's no way you miss, how can I put this? Questions from members that should be self-evident.
There are things that happen at Expo that I was shocked happened at Expo. So like arguments, things that just become bigger than they should. And staff does an amazing job of never letting it be a distraction. And I promise you, no one works harder on that floor than that staff. And I have complained many times that suppliers have it harder than distributors because we have to stand still and we all have our silly arguments. It's not half as hard as that staff work. So you're right. Correct. I had a lot more fun this year.
Yeah.
Because I was exhausted.
I would think so. And to anybody who says, I've got it the hardest at Expo, unless you take it in the shorts because you didn't write welcome a certain way on a sign, trust me, you don't have it as bad. So you left PPAI, you've been at Charles River Apparel, and you're leading the sales there, which is fantastic. Yes. I want to ask you first, how does it feel working for such a long-standing and super respected but family business?
Absolutely. It feels amazing. I will say, like, each decision I made, even when it was picking Raining Rose to buy solar advertising, is built on a company's values and what they bring. And I will say, like, in initial conversations with Charles River, one of the things I was most impressed about that really speaks to where I'm at, like, today in my career journey was immense intentionality and focus on high care. And those are like deeply important things to me. I actually think I heard you and Natalie say it last week that you can't teach care. And to come into an organization with such high care at every single level. And then the kind of intentionality that their CEO, Jason Lipset, brings, our CEO, Jason Lipset brings, is amazing. Like down to like the word selection in the job description was there. And that is like and I think about the kind of work I want to do today, it's deeply entrenched. It's at every level, like top down into processes and really building that intentionality. I do think that's something special about family owned companies as well that I've seen.
I do, but let me push back a little bit because I
Yeah,
worked for family owned companies.
sure.
And it seems like, and now maybe it's me, like I'm the common denominator, so I'm perfectly willing to accept that it's me. But there's always been a moment where it's very clear I do not share a last name with the owners.
Yes.
How do you navigate that? Now, granted, Charles River is a pretty large organization, so and this is nothing negative. I think it's very difficult. Let me backtrack a little bit. One of the things I loathe in business is organizations that say things like, we're a family. No, you're not.
Mhm.
No, you're not, because you'll tolerate a lot more from your brother who may not be pulling his weight, but he's got the family name, than you would from an employee who does not share that family name, maybe not doing the same level of work, of
Yeah.
mediocre work. So, how have you, if I don't, are you worried that there's that moment?
You know, I'm not, but I was going into it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's one of the things I dug into a lot in my interview phase with them. Because you're right. Like, that's absolutely the thing that happens. I think one of the things I've realized is that you can be in the in group or out group at any company. And whether
Hmm.
that's because of family or because you went through something hard together or because um, you have connections from a past job or whatever that looks like. I've been both in, right, and felt the joy of being in the inn, and been not in the inn at companies. And I think one of the things that I've realized I look for, regardless of that, is that the person I work for doesn't think they're the smartest person in the room,
Yeah.
even when they are. And I
Right.
think like one of my favorite books that I think you and I have talked about before is Ego is the Enemy. And I love the quote that it's impossible to learn that which you believe you already know.
Correct.
And so what I look for most is that the person I will work for, the person that leads the organization, aligns with that sort of mentality. Um, this feels very much different in that I think Jason sees the areas he knows really well. He also sees the areas that he doesn't have as much strength in, which guess what? I happen to know very well because I grew
Yeah.
up in it. So like
Now,
and that's been fun to learn and from each other. But you're right. If he brought that mentality and was surrounded by family members that shared it, it probably wouldn't have been the move I made.
yeah, and it goes back to the old Ted Lasso thing of be curious, not judgmental,
Yes,
which I love.
love.
And I know Jason a little bit. I knew his dad a little bit better, very quite frankly. But what I know about Jason, he is very thoughtful. He's whenever I've had a conversation with him, he reminds me of his dad because he'll ask a question and then just be quiet and listen.
Yeah,
And you might answer the question and wait for a response, and he's still processing. And so you have
yeah,
to learn to kind of let that breathe for a second and not fill that empty space, which I love.
which
And
is
like I
so
said,
hard.
go
I want to
yeah,
fill the empty space badly. Yes,
it
you're not wrong.
is. It
Very
is.
Jason.
And one of the things too with family businesses, I think that really can get icky is if the family business seems to be the easy path for the next generation.
Yes.
That's where I see the challenges in family businesses. And I've seen it where, hey, you want to work here? That's great. Go work out in the real world for several years, then come talk to us. Go get another
Right.
experience. And I always think that's important. How did working with your parents at Solar help you transition into Charles River?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I'm not sure I thought about how much that was going to help me. Shame on me because it's a very similar experience, but I hadn't. And it really has. I think it helped me understand what ownership really looks like, right?
Hmm.
When you own something, whether it's a process or frankly the company,
Right.
and the like importance of the big things and the little things when that
Yeah.
happens. And that can make a company great. It can make a company slow. It can do a lot of things. And I think being able to continue to help Jason use that to make it
Hmm.
great, right? To make it intentional, to make it focused on experience, to make it all those ways. I think so often when I haven't worked in a family business, people can see ownership as I get to make the decisions. When in reality, what ownership is I'm accountable for the results. Like
Yeah.
my butt's the one in the chair when someone gets
Hmm.
asked. And I think like it's cool to be. I saw that immediately coming back in, and it reminded me of my time because Raining Rose is also owned by an individual as well.
Sure.
Um, so like of those times of what ownership looked like in those seats, and that's been cool to see.
I love it. let's wrap up a little bit here. So you're
Yeah,
widely recognized as a sales leader. So I've got a couple quick sales leader things I want to ask you.
I
So
love it.
one of the things you said is that you believe that sales leadership is rooted in clarity, accountability, and partnership. I really love that triumvirate. What does that mean for you and the people that work with you?
Absolutely. So I'm a huge believer in the idea of radical candor, which is the idea that you can be both kind and honest at the same time, and that the other three quadrants are things like being passive aggressive or being what I like to refer to as Iowa nice, where you don't say the real thing. And I think like being clear is being kind. One of the people I worked for in my career taught me that, and I think that I've brought that through every role. And if I tell you the truth up front, that is kindness. That is me showing you. And I spend a lot of time with the people I work with telling them that gap spotting for me is you showing me you care. Like, you're not going to offend me. I'm not going to feel bad if I forgot something. Telling me that is me, you showing me that you care about me. And so I spend a lot of time trying to ingrain that. That is not an easy message for people to hear in the work environment, most times anywhere. And so I'm 4.5 months in and really starting to entrench that with my team now. But it takes time to get people comfortable in that space because it's vulnerable, right?
Yeah, I love it. When I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is being too nice. And you
Yes.
can be radically candid and you can
Yeah.
explain to people, I'm a big believer there's no growth without a little friction. Of course, I can bring anything back to Van Halen, and I will do so now. But Van Halen as a band would have been as great as they were if David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen did not fight continuously over things. So I love that.
Yeah.
How do you motivate your team in a remote environment?
Ooh, that's a great one. So we have had weekly calls pretty much since I started. And I'm sure that feels like a really basic thing to do, but I think it's so often if you don't have that consistent stake in the ground, even if
Yeah.
it is as simple as a weekly call, you get loosey goosey, you get off on your own, you become an island. As salespeople become islands very easily, and we do it to ourselves. And we have a few standing topics. We talk about what went well and what didn't go well that week. So someone will bring up like, "Hey, I got feedback that this shade of blue is darker than someone expected. Has anyone else heard that? How did we handle that?" I also get things like, "Oh my gosh, I told this story about our Patriots partnership and it helped me sell this custom order because they understood that we made this custom blue for the Patriots." And so, letting them learn from each other reminds them that like they all have something they're the smartest one in the room on and brings them together. I think that it's simple, but I think it's the one thing that I do that really brings them together.
I love it. What is the most difficult leadership lesson you've ever learned?
Ooh, that sometimes, no matter what you do, people aren't going to care as much as you do. I, and I still get caught in it sometimes. I just keep thinking if I explain it better, if I show them better, I can get someone there. And also, the back end of that is that, and that's okay. I think is the one I learned
Mm-hmm.
more recently is that it's okay. Everyone needs BNC players too. Like it's okay. Not everyone has to care at the same level to still do their job
Yeah.
well. There are jobs that don't require that, and so twofold lesson.
I'll add to
Learning.
that, if I may. One of the
Yeah.
ones I learned, I think the most difficult leadership lesson I ever learned, and I didn't learn it soon enough, was you can't want more for someone than they want for themselves. And
Oh,
so if someone's
yes.
real happy at the sales level they're at, the amount of money they're making, there's very little I can do to motivate that person to sell 10% more or 20% more. So you can't want more for someone than they want for themselves. So
Mm, absolutely. Love that.
that's all I had. Lindsey, do you have anything we should discuss before we say goodbye?
Yeah. So it's
Oh,
funny. I was actually around the realm of family owned company that I was going to bring up. And
yep.
so I love that it's kind of where you ended up focusing. So I know that in your career, you've worked for family owned companies
Yeah.
and that even at Brandivate, you have consulted with some along the
Mhm.
way.
Yeah.
What is the best advice you give to someone in a seat like mine, who I know you've worked with people in a seat much
Mhm.
like mine, who's in high leadership, but not part of the family, to make sure they make meaningful change in a family organization?
I think to remember, that's a great question. I think to remember that at the end of the day, we are occupying a role in an organization. Chief sales officer, sales representative, marketing manager, whatever it is, that you are a title. You have to separate your person, who you are as a human being, from that title. And what I mean by that is something happens to you, you decide to retire, you quit, you leave, whatever it is, that title remains, that job remains. And so I always tell people, whether you're part of the family or not, you look at yourself as a steward of that business. You are holding that title for that moment in time. Maybe it's 20, 30 years, maybe it's a year and a half. It doesn't matter. For the time you're there, you are the steward of that. And one of the things I always counsel people on is when they're frustrated with John Doe. I'm really frustrated with this employee, John Doe. But they start feeling bad because John Doe's a real person and has real family and has real issues. It's always to, when you're talking about a challenging employee, talk about the role. It's not about John Doe, it's about the marketing manager. So anytime you're having a difficult conversation, it's not John Doe's really cheesing me off. It is the marketing manager, I don't think, is performing in the way we need it to perform. And when you separate it like that, you can be, I don't want to say cold, because you can always be compassionate and care, but you make better decisions because you're looking at it truly from a only business perspective. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It makes great sense and it's great advice. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, Lindsey, I think you've said it all. Perhaps you've said too much. I don't
Probably.
know. But before I say goodbye, let's thank our sponsor. Big thanks to our good buddies over at Seven Sourcing for sponsoring this fine April broadcast. When you're ready to partner, to be the partner your clients want, the one that delivers unique, custom, and bespoke branded merchandise designed exclusively for your clients, reach out to Russ and his team at sales@sevensourcing.com. Lindsey, thank you again for taking the
Well,
time, and we'll do it again sometime.